The first part of this lecture is simply reviewing what I talked about before, namely what is cladistics, what is a cladogram, and how to read the diagram. And so just looking at this diagram again, anywhere you see a red dot, notice that there's a branching, two branches off of that. And what that means is above that dot, everything has a specific character, a specific bony feature or tooth feature that defines it. And everything above that node has it. Everything below that node does not. And then I talked more about the ornithischians as the group that has the so-called bird hip diagrams. And so again, everything above this dot has the bird hip diagram where the ischium and the pubis are together and pointing backwards. That is contrasted with the saurischians, which is this node, this dot here, where everything above it has a hip where the pubis and the ischium point in different directions. Now we're going to go up this ornithischian side first and cover all these ornithischians first. And I'm going to say right off the bat, go ahead and let's look at this sort of Thyreophora. But before we reach Thyreophora, notice the first group that branches off is this weird group called the Fabrosaurids. We don't have very many of those. We're not entirely sure where they fit. We do know that they are ornithischians, but where exactly here has still kind of been flip-flopping around. You'll see trees or cladograms that have them in different places. But Thyreophora is a group that is very firm, and so that's what we want to emphasize now. Thyreophora literally means shield bearer. These are organisms that have huge sections of enhanced or enlarged skeletal chunks that become armor on the parts of their bodies, usually over the back area. And we have two different families, the Ankylosauria and the Stegosauria. And you see here the little stegosaur on the right and the Ankylosaur on the left. And you can see the big plates sticking out over the back, over the vertebral column of the stegosaur, and on the Ankylosaur, the plates are all fused together and cover all of the back and the sides and the shoulder and the hips and down the tail. Stegosaurs and Ankylosaurs have this armor. Other dinosaurs on that cladogram do not. Now, we do, and so this is sort of refreshing your memory on what a node is and how it's defined by these characters. So again, above this node, we have Ankylosaurs, Stegosaurs, and they're defined by very specific things. But we have a few other organisms, weird ones, that they're they have pieces of armor, but they're not truly Stegosaurs, not Ankylosaurs. If they were to be on this cladogram, they would branch off earlier here and not be part of these two branches. And so we call these two the primitive Thyreophores. There are a couple of them, and we've lowered them down to the genus level in taxonomy. And they are the Scutellosaurus and the Scelidosaurus. Now, they're not terribly important in the grand scheme of dinosaurs, but I just want to sort of show you these two things to show you how I'm going to talk about dinosaurs for the rest of this particular middle part of the class. So they both have a time range of being from the Jurassic. One is from Arizona, one is from England. You can look at their measurements. We have relatively complete skeletons of these things. And when I say length, that's usually from the tip of the nose on the head to the tip of the tail. And so notice Scutellosaurus is a much smaller organism than Scelidosaurus. And then a couple other features. Notice I talk about their limbs, their legs. And this characteristic of a Scutellosaurus is very important. The hind limbs are slightly shorter than the forelimbs. That's an interesting group. That's an interesting And that's contrasted with Scelidosaurus, where the fore and hind limbs, basically the arms and legs, are about equal length. This simple leaf-shaped teeth, we'll talk about that again later. It's a good indicator of something that eats plants. And then differences in the relative covering of the bony armor plates on the body. So then there's usually some picture like this. These type pictures are the bony pictures. These represent what we have from the fossil record. Now, these aren't the really cool diagrams where you see the flesh and the color and the eyes looking at you that you see in a lot of dinosaur things. Those are artists' reconstructions. That is fleshing out these bones as we find them. And that's a unique art science in and of itself, but just something to think about. We're going to have these bony type pictures here. And a lot of things you'll look at, you go, oh, there's some ribs, there's the humerus, and there's the humerus, there's the femur and the femur, etc. Things that you should remember from that bone anatomy section. But other things to look at are, again, this sort of relative limb length, what type of hip it has, etc. Let's go back to the whole idea of artists' renditions and look at these next two slides. This is going to be our first example of fleshing out dinosaurs. Right off the bat, I need to say that the color of dinosaurs, that's mostly guesswork. We just don't know. And that's why you have a wide variety. These artists have taken great liberties to I guess, flesh them out and then color them up, make them pretty. So there it's largely guesswork, but then how these organisms are standing, how they're walking, whether they have big muscular arms and legs or rather spindly ones, that we can usually tell from the actual bones. And so these three pictures here are different artists' renditions of our friend the Scutellosaurus. And you can see well, look, we don't know how it lived, walked, etc. Here you've got two renditions where it's walking on all fours. Here it's clearly bipedal. You can see the bony extensions off the back and on the sides. And again, I put this here. This comes from a postage stamp. Dinosaurs are on a lot of stamps, and I'll show you a lot of pictures of those things. And notice the wide range of colors. So there's Scutellosaurus. Here is Scelidosaurus, again, highly armored up, except a bare head. And here all of them show it walking on all fours, but this lower one has it, this Tanzanian stamp has it almost like an alligator or crocodile-like thing. The other two look more dinosaur-oid. Again, artist's rendition. Artists are free to interpret these things in many ways, but usually the gait, the stance, and the musculature, that comes from the bones. All right. Can we look at the part of the cladogram that is the Thyreophora a little bit more detail? And yes, we can. So if we go back to the old cladogram, this one right here, and we're going to take this little section from Thyrea up. Here you see we just have ankylosaurs and stegosaurs, but if we flesh this out a little bit more and enlarge it to include those other organisms, we get a cladogram like this. So again, there's the Thyreophora. Everything above that node has armor plating. Right off the bat, there's those primitive Thyreophorans. So we're going to sort of lump those over here. We recognize those as shield bearers, armored dinosaurs, but there they are. Go up higher. Now we have this node here. It's not named, but it shows the different branching between our friends, the ankylosaurs and the stegosaurs. And remember, in the other cladogram, I just had a limb that was called the stegosaurs and another one that was called ankylosaurs. But as you can see, if you examine it closer then, you have two different types of ankylosaurs. And among the Stegosauria, we have the Stegosaurids and then this other weird thing called Wyangosaurus over here. So we have these different groups that we can lump over here, and our primitive Thyreophorans, the Scutellosaurus and the Scelidosaurus, are just these two things that are over here. So what you would need to remember is that those two are united by having that armor, but they're still different, and they're not true stegosaurs or ankylosaurs, which are defined by other characters. Now, what I'm going to do next, the next lecture is going to be on ankylosaurs. We'll talk about those and get done with those, and then we'll talk about stegosaurs. And each of those will be two separate lecture groups.